No matter where I stand, no matter who I am. Some people will only ever see the son of a preacher man.
Welcome back to another episode of Son of a Preacherman, episode 4. This will be our Father's Day edition. Once again, I have a special guest, my father, Jerry L. Given Sr. It's always great to have him on the show, and we start off with fathers period. Sometimes I believe that fathers now are like Yetis. Like, you hear about them, but you never see them. Why do you think that is?
I think one of the reasons because fathers are becoming distinct to a certain degree, because you had mentioned it earlier, when the cameras move in your professional games and interview the star, first thing he says is, "Hi, Mom." And it's probably because, in some cases, not all, that the mom is the dominant or the only parent in the home, especially in the African American community, where you're seeing less and less of that male figure growing up in the household.
And why do you feel like, I guess, it seems like the media always want to focus on a father not being there?
Because that's what sells. It's just like, if it's no news, it's not making news. When you turn on, whether it's the radio or television set, most time it's about some tragedy that has taken place. Very seldom do you hear the good stories, even though they're out there. That's not what sells the papers.
Yeah, it's crazy, because I think about my own personal story. When me and my wife were going in for our third child, JL, to be here, and when we got there, the nurse said, "Is this your brother?" And I looked, and Joe was like, "No, like, this is my husband." She was like, "Oh." He said, "Because we're not used to that." And it was like, wow, we're not used to the fathers being here. And then she was like, "Well, it shows that you have 2 other children." She was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Well, is he the father to your other 2 children?" She was like, "He's the father of all 3. She's like, "We're not trying to be funny." But it's not. And I'm with you. I feel like that we talk about the negative, but we forget to talk about the fathers that are doing something. Fathers are going to work every day, making sure that his family has what they need. We focus so much on the negativity of fathers, period, regardless of the fact of what happened. And that goes to my next question is, one of my big things is, like, what are we passing down? And, as fathers, if we're not being there, then we're passing down being absent.
Correct.
If we were beating on our wives and our sons see it, they possibly, not saying all of them would,
Right.
You're passing down that anger, you're passing down that hate. What did you do different to pass down? Because you showed us, like, how you opened the door for Mom, how you opened the door for my sisters, how you went to work every day. Not only do that, I mean, you also a pastor as well. What motivated you to pass down that type than what the stereotype is for it?
Well, it was the blueprint, the model that I had in front of me, and that was my father, your grandfather, because there were 9 of us children, 5 boys and 4 girls, and we never saw our father strike our mother. In fact, we didn't even witness, in all those years growing up, him arguing with Mom. We didn't know why a lot of winter nights when we would come home from church and they would send us in the house, and they'd stay out in the car with it running for like 30 minutes, sometimes 45. We didn't find out until later on that they had a disagreement, maybe that they wanted to hash out, but not in front of the children. So all we knew of Dad, Purvis Gibbons, was the model that the Detroit Pistons adopted during their championship years: go to work. He went to work sick or well. And so that was something that all of the boys could grab a hold of. And he never tolerated us even using our sisters for punching bags. And so we saw this man get up a lot of mornings, go to work, winter, spring, summer, fall. So for me, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to follow after him. In fact, I almost lost my life running behind him, because everywhere he went, I wanted to go. I mean, even my first day of kindergarten, he took me to class, put me in a room, and he turned around, and I'm running out of the class crying because I wanted to go where he went, but I couldn't. And so this one day, I remember well, Mama told me, because I was too young to remember actually, how he had came home and put me in the house and said, "Jerry, you can't go on this trip." Unbeknown to him, when he came back out and got in the truck, I came out the back door and actually walked behind the truck. I was only like about 4 or 5 years old. He didn't know it. So when they backed the vehicle up that was loaded with iron, they ran over me. And it just so happened, and I know it was God, that sitting on the front porch directly across the street from my house was a man who had been in the war and was sent home because he was shell-shocked. So everybody on the street thought he was crazy, because every time a plane would fly over his head, he would go into these gyrations like he was being attacked again. But God used that man to save my life, because he hollered, he yelled, he screamed, and he got our father's attention at the time that I had got stuck on the wheel and began to roll between the wheel and the axle, which would have crushed me. So when my father heard him scream, he stopped the truck, and he heard something hit the ground, having no idea what it was. He thought it was actually a piece of metal that had fell off the back of the truck. But when he ran around and he saw me land on the ground, and Mama described it like, she said, I was bleeding from my head to my toe. I had a fractured skull. I had a hole right here in my neck. My left arm was broke. My right arm was broke. And basically, I was dying right before my father's eyes. And Mama told us how he reached down and picked me up and basically held me up to God and said, if you spare his life, I'll preach your word. Because at that time, he was running from the ministry. And that was like, probably 57 years ago. And thanks be to God, I'm here. So that's all I know growing up, was a man who didn't just talk it, but he lived it.
Well, I can honestly say that obviously he did a great job, because the same story was pretty much my story without the injury. I know for me, I want to be with you everywhere you went, to the point to where I didn't even want my sisters to be. When you would go places, I made up a rule that boys go with daddy, girls go with mommy. So you were my first hero, and I literally watched how you treated mom. I watched how you treated people in general, no matter what race, no matter what lifestyle, no matter if they were clean or dirty, you treat them all the same. And so it's just like the thing of when you open the door for somebody see it, they open the door for you. And it starts that effect of goodness instead of the negative effect. And that's the effect that you had on me. And I always tell my wife and my coworkers, and everybody say, if I can be half the man that you are, then I will be okay as a father. And it's funny because thinking about what you said as far as granddad and yourself, being a preacher and a father, and that being two jobs. So a question I have for you is, can you be a great preacher and a bad father?
Yes, and I want to say something while I'm thinking about it.
Go ahead.
And what you had mentioned earlier.
Yes, sir.
About you witnessed your father mixing and hugging and loving on everybody, regardless of their race or creed. because in 1965, during the political uprisings, you had the riot in, I think it was Watts. Then in 66, you had the same thing happen in Newark, New Jersey. Then in 67, 1 year later, there was a riot in Detroit that left over 61 people killed, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damages, and some of that property in the Motor City has not been restored. And so what was happening in Detroit, as far as the rioting, trickled down to Flint, which is 1 hour north of the Motor City. And so me being caught up in the peer pressure with my African American friends, we wanted to go around and fight anybody that didn't look like us. But I remember very clearly that even though our church was in a predominantly black neighborhood and your grandfather was a pastor, he would go around and pick up some of the members. And I recall vividly one of those members was a Caucasian lady who was faithful. So here I am with my African American face, riding in the car past my friends who I'm trying to impress with people who didn't look like them. But that was the example that your father set. And as I took that pattern from him, growing up in life, some of my best friends actually didn't look like me.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And so on your next subject, can you repeat it again?
Yeah, I said, can you be a great pastor and a bad father?
A great pastor and a bad father, yes. And I'm going to tell you one reason why. There's an old saying, not necessarily a true saying, that the pastor's kids are sometimes the worst in the church.
Right.
That may or may not be true depending on the situation. Every scenario is different.
Right.
But if that is the case, most often it's because that pastor has spent more of his time rehabilitating other people's children in the church and neglecting his own. And I've seen that happen in a lot of cases where you have an excellent pastor, but if you were to interview his children privately, they would give their father a thumbs down when it comes to fathering. Never questioned his pastoring ability, but it was because he loved the church more than he actually loved his children, which is really not biblical because God should be first and your children should be next and then the church. But oftentimes it's reversed. So yes, I've seen it happen out of my own eyes where you've had guys who were stomped down, pastors, to the T. But when it comes down to fatherhood, they often fail.
Yeah, I believe it was John Gray, Pastor John Gray, who said that he wasn't going to marry the church and date his family.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wow. And I was thinking about it, and not just with a pastor. You could be anything. It would be sad if you had a firefighter who put out fires and all everybody else's home, but can't put out the fire in his home.
That's true.
Because he's so busy taking care of that, but he's letting his burn. And I think sometimes we get it mixed up is that, a father job is 24/7 as well, and you
Right.
have to be able to be that no matter what, and to some degree be able to separate the two between your occupation of whatever you're going out to get paid for and your 24/7 occupation as a father. Because even when I go to work at Best Buy, when I leave Best Buy, I'm done with Best Buy for that day.
Right.
But when I go to Best Buy, my children is still my priority.
Exactly.
And then when I leave Best Buy, they're my priority.
Exactly.
And then when I go to church, they my priority.
Right.
So I thought about that because I think sometimes we get that confused with because you are a pastor or you have this great title, then that just pretty much wipes out anything that you're not doing right or that you need help in that area. We cover that up, but
Right.
we can't do that if we trying to help because we don't want our children to hate the church.
Exactly.
Because decision that we made,
Right.
and
Right.
a lot of times we can get messed up there. And in doing that too, I was thinking about going back to like passed down. We talked about passed down because I've watched so many times. We don't realize that every little thing that we do as a father is that much of a big deal. And I think sometimes, I'm not saying that you can't make it without a father because you can.
Right.
As long as you have God, you can do anything.
Exactly.
But I'll never forget, I went to work one day and I came home. I must have had a good day at work, I guess, because I was singing and whistling. And about an hour after Joy, my wife, came to me, she said, you know, you set the atmosphere in this house. And I was like, she said, when you whistle, your children whistle.
Mm-hmm.
And said, when they whistle, I whistle because they're good. She said, you don't realize how much a father, how important his role is in the household. And I think we watch a lot of these mass shootings that's going on. A lot of, when you look at their background, they had no father figure.
That's right. Now,
I'm not saying that you can't be good without one. You can. But I'm saying that that's how much of an effect the father had, because the father, I know my son, he's a charmer, so he can charm his mom, and he can ask her. I'll walk in the house, or I'll be in the house with him all day, and he won't ask me for certain things. As soon as his mom come home, he'll go right to her. But he has that kind of, it's not the fear thing, it's just the respect of like the father. And that's what I'm letting other people know, not only with your natural father, it's the same thing with your spiritual father.
That's true.
And you can tell the people who had a spiritual father and who have, I know they have this saying that say, no God or no Christ, no life, and no Christ, no life. So they say K-N-O-W, no Christ, and then you know life. But then they say no Christ, and then N-O, and then no life. And so even with that, I'm trying to let everybody know that like it's important to have that relationship with your father.
It is.
Your natural father and your spiritual father.
Correct.
In other words, and also recognizing that your father is human. And he make mistakes.
Right.
And he was learning just like you learning.
Exactly.
And sometimes we want to be hard on our parents until we get in a situation, then we want people to feel sorry for us. But we never gave our parents that shot, especially if you have a parent that's really trying. Messed up, admitted they messed up and trying. I get that you have ones that don't, but I think for the ones that are trying, you know, to give another chance. I mean, we were given another chance. We were given many chances far as Christ. So how can you help the generation to come after you be better fathers and then pass down what was taught to their children?
Well, you mentioned just earlier about how your wife Joy noticed one day how you came home whistling, and it pretty much set the mood or established the atmosphere for that house. Because in a lot of cases, husbands or fathers bring home their work problems. They've had a bad day, then they take it out on the wife. She takes it out on the children. They take it out on the dog, and it goes downhill. And so when you have a father who, or a husband who is mature enough and grounded enough to separate work from home, from church, because you're going to have some issues there too, that shows to me a line of his depth really in God. So when, as soon as men realize and understand that we really set the thermostat in our house to better. And so what we do is we need to understand that Dietrich Haddon recorded a song about, probably 20 years ago, and it's called Got to Live the Life. And he says, somebody is depending on you. He said, there's a little baby boy who would love to be in your shoes. There's a little baby girl who doesn't need to hear any bad news. Because so many cases where the children look up to their father or their pastor, all right, and they model their life after them. So they become a god to them. And so if and when they trip and fall, that has a devastating effect on that child, because he's always, in his mind, there's nobody any greater than my father. So we have to always be careful that whatever we do, whatever we say, what we don't do, is not just impacting us, but it's impacting our followers, or people that look up to us. So it's imperative that we follow that blueprint in Psalm 37 and 37, where David said, mark the perfect man and behold the upright, for the end of that man is peace.
Wow, yeah, that's wow, that's good. I just know I've seen too many people that have been hurt, and been bitter. And because they have been bitter, they've passed down that bitterness. And I think about the movie I watched recently called The Hate You Give. And I had no idea at the time. They talked about Tupac and how Tupac had thug life. And me all these years thought thug life was just some thug on the street. Like you just walk around and you wore certain clothes. I had no idea what thug life meant. And then when they broke down what thug life meant, I said, oh my goodness, which was the hate you give little infants. Pretty much messes up everybody. You use F everybody. But when I thought about that, I was like, oh my goodness, because it was literally the hate was being passed down. And like I said, when you passing down that, and it's funny to me how, and you definitely comment on this, it seems like we always blaming this generation for like how the world has gone bad and blaming them, and we use millennial this, millennial that, but it's kind of funny to me that the generation we blame is the one that we raised.
Exactly. That is true. See, it's so important, and you touched on it earlier, that we understand that before you can love anyone else, you have to first love yourself. Okay? You can't give away anything that you don't already have. All right? Hurting people hurt people.
Right.
All right? If you do the history on these pedophiles and so on and so forth, you'll find out that earlier in their life, someone did to them what they are doing to somebody else's child now. And so it's imperative that we teach our children to love no matter what. We teach our children to forgive, not to hold on to things, because when you do, basically you're carrying that weight around because you refuse to let something go. And that time things happen to us, people do, people don't do, and it's really severely wounds us. But we got to learn to let it go. Jesus said in St. Luke 17:3, if thy brother trespass against thee, rebuke him, admonish him. He said, but if he repent, forgive him. And when you forgive a person, you're supposed to release that. You're not supposed to hold on to that grudge. If I tell you, okay, it's cool, we done squashed it, but then 10 days later, all right, I do something or say something and trigger the same reaction out of you, and you throw that back in my face, you really didn't release it. So God wants us to forgive, and he wants us to let it go. Because we got to understand something, that if we don't, the same thing that we're carrying around with us, we're going to pass on to those that are coming up behind us.
Yeah, wow, yeah, it's just amazing, and I'm thinking about all the things that I have witnessed as far as you, and like I said, it was a Father's Day edition. Once again, thank you for my father, but I've watched you, even when it comes to being a pastor, that being a hard thing, and what comes along with that, how you were able to talk with the members, counsel the members, how you were able to still bring the word of God, help your family, and even things that really hurt me in moments of rumors, like even rumors about you, rumors made, and watched how you did that, because I couldn't understand how the people that you knew that hurt you, that you knew that stabbed you in the back, you knew that kicked you while you was down, when they fell, I wanted to walk right past them. Mm-hmm. I did. I was like, you didn't hurt my father, you did whatever, but you reached down your hand to help them. And for a while, I used to be so frustrated with you, because I'm like, why is he helping these people who he knows just hurt him on purpose? But then I realized when I got older that you was trying to show me something bigger than that, which was God. Right. And it was just amazing. I said, that's what you passed down to me. It was like, and I'm not where you at. So I'm just being honest. Like I definitely forgive, but it's harder for me to forget than what it is for you. I'm just being honest. But even that part of doing that, that's one of the things that you passed down, is that I saw you show Christ. Like, in other words, you loved your enemy, you loved your neighbor. Don't mean you hung out with your enemy, and I had to realize that, but you loved them. And so that thing you passed down. So now that's something that I can take and try to pass down to my children, because, they need that. I mean, they need to know, and I use all the time is that you teach us, I always say it's to God, and you always use the scripture about the head of every man.
Mm-hmm. 1 Corinthians 11:3. The head of every woman is a man. Every man is Christ. The head of Christ is God. And as you mentioned earlier about you've witnessed the way I treat people that you know have not been fair to me.
Facts.
But I thought about the song that the Jackson Southerners recorded about 40 years ago. And they said that the only time that you should look down on a man, irregardless of how he treated you and now he's fallen, the only time you should look down on him is when you're reaching down to pick him up. And they recorded another song about a year later that said there is some good in the worst of us, there is some bad in the best of us. So that doesn't leave room for any of us to talk about the rest of us. So the truth be told, all of us have areas in our life that we can improve on.
Yes. And like I said, it's what's being passed down. And I truly I thank you. I can't say how many times I thank you for being the father that you have been, for being unselfish a father as well. I've always seen when people needed that you gave them. You thought about them first. You thought about their needs. If it's something that they needed, you did whatever you can to help them. And I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about spiritually. I'm talking about mentally. I have one minister that goes through our time that say you his psychiatrist. So in other words, every time he have an issue, he can go in your office, lay down on the couch, and just talk away. And so to be able to see that people respect you, like when I mention your name, I think about today how I have my name tag now. I have Jerry Givens. When normally you're supposed to have your first name. People say, "Why you get your whole name?" I say, "Because it's my father's name."
Oh wow!
So it's like it's honoring my father. That's the more important than the GM worker that you were. More important than the pastor. The title I love the most about you was father.
Oh wow!
And I think that trumped everything to the point to where, like I said, they all know now. When you got that, that's because it's my. So you're a junior. I am. That is the name I am. Just like, oh, I'm so glad that I actually have his name because I just felt like that name you have made bigger than I ever thought it could be. So Jerry Givens has been the father that I hope that everybody else can have, because I feel like that I wasn't short of anything. I wasn't short of love. I wasn't short of teachings to Christ. And I feel like because of you, I am who I am today. Because of you, our family is where we're at. Because of you and believing in God and putting Him first. I just want to say a million times over, thank you so much. You never hear from me. I appreciate you so much for everything that you've done for me, my friends, my family, everybody. You've just been a great inspiration. You have definitely left your mark, not only in this church, but in our community.
Well, I must say that I'm humbled and I'm honored. And I must also add that the way you describe me is the same way, or the same description that I have always given to my father, your grandfather, because that was what we saw out of him growing up. I remember the time where, when he was pastoring, there was a particular guy in the city of Flint that had borrowed money from him, not just a few dollars, and had failed to pay him back. I knew this had took place because I was there. I witnessed the transaction. And the same gentleman came back to the church about a month later wanting to borrow more money. And it upset me when I saw my father go in his pocket and give him the hard-earned cash that I thought should have went to his children. And I let him know how I felt about it. And he would always tell me, "That's all right, Jerry Lynn." He'd say, "God will bless you for it." So in my mind, I'm saying, why give a man money who already owed you? But that was the type of man that your grandfather was. And so my brothers and I, my sisters, we saw that in him. All right? We watched, we observed how he treated our mother, your grandmother. We saw him, the way he catered to the members of the church. All right? And, you know, the scripture in the Bible where Paul said in Romans 13:8, owe no man but to love one another. And a lot of times when people read that scripture or hear it, they think about money. But it's not just restricted to money. It means you don't supposed to owe anybody anything. If you owe them, if you need to apologize to them, do that. Otherwise, you owing them that. If you see somebody in a position and you're in a spot where you can show them honor, give them that honor. Otherwise, you're owing them something that you're not giving them. So all of the things that you described to me, I saw it in your grandfather.
Wow. Yeah, I just want everybody to know that, you know, your father, you know, you don't get to choose your father. You know, the father is the reason why you're here with your parents, but in a special way to honor them as much as you can with no disrespect, because one day you'll be a father as well. And so I appreciate, again, my father taking the time to be with us today, to tell some more of his life, but not only that, to help others as well, because even if you don't have a father, we want you to know that it's a spiritual father out there. And trust me, it's just like when you have on you know, clothes from like a cheap store, and then you buy clothes from a different store, people can tell the difference. And it'll be the same thing when you with Christ. People will be able to tell the difference. If you truly have him, I always say, no matter what we do, when we leave here, we hope Christ intervened in our life, or come in our life so much to when we come back, somebody can tell the difference.
Exactly. Let me say this while I'm thinking about it
Yeah.
now, 'cause I know we're talking about fathers, and rightfully so, because that day is approaching.
Yes.
I think Mother's Day was a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
I heard Shirley Caesar, Pastor Shirley Caesar. She recorded a song, and I think the song was "Don't Drive Your Mother Away." And she said, your mother might be a drunkard, but she's yet your mother. Okay? She might be a prostitute, but she's yet your mother. She might be an addict, but she's yet your mother. And when I flip that around, the same thing can be applied to a father. This goes out to all of the children who didn't have a father figure in their life, biologically. Okay? Seek a spiritual father, because even though your biological father may have been or is a drunk, he's yet your father.
Right.
Alcoholic,
Right.
addict,
Right.
whatever the case might be, gambler.
Right.
All right, you saw him beat on your mother. He is or was yet your father. And so what you need to do is love on that man.
Right.
Even though in your mind you feel like that's the last thing he needs. But love on him anyway. And at the same time, it should motivate you, especially if you're a young man growing up, that if and when I become a father, I guarantee you what I saw in my father, my children will never see in me.
Right. Well, I promise I'm going to end. I will say this, and I agree with you 100%. I'll never forget, I believe I heard T.D. Jakes tell a story about a father with two sons. And the father was a drunk, a deadbeat drunk, and he had twins. And one of them ended up being a deadbeat drunk, and one of them ended up being a successful father and graduated from college. And so they asked the son of deadbeat drunk, they said, why are you a deadbeat drunk? He said, because my father's a deadbeat drunk.
Wow.
And then so they asked the one that ended up being a successful father and had the children and graduated from college, they said, well, why are you successful as a father and you have your college degree? He said, because my dad was a deadbeat drunk.
Wow.
So they both had the same situation, but the choices that they made were different. So we just want everybody to know how important fathers are.
Yes.
And no matter what, make the best of it and do what I do with a lot of bosses I have. I have bosses that I learn what to do, and I have some bosses I learn what not to do.
Wow.
So do the same thing with your father. But we want to just appreciate our fathers on today, and we're praying for great fathers and to keep promoting great fathers so you see them more and not see the ones that are not there.
So that's amazing. And the story you just told that you heard rehearsed from Bishop Jake, he had 2 sons, right? The father was a deadbeat, drunk. One of the sons became just like him, and when they interviewed him, they asked him, why did you end up this way? He said, because that's what my father was.
Right.
And then they interviewed the second son, who went on to be successful in life, and they said, what would you attribute it to? He said, because my father was a drunk. In other words, I use that as a motivation piece. I didn't want to end up like that. That is powerful. So to let you know that your destiny is in your choice.
That's right. Yeah, the end on this note, the song Good Good Father, about that man right there.
Wow.
If you like this video, hit the like button or share it to a family or friend.